Sometimes I think Red Hollow never truly slept. The town only pretended to rest, like a body no longer breathing, yet still keeping its chest still to deceive the living. On those nights when the wind cut through the alleys like a blade, there put something deeper, something beyond mere silence. I heard the river, and the river moaned. Make no mistake, wasn't the sound of the current, pushing rocks or the wind ripping through twisted trees. It was a human lament, too heavy to be mistaken for nature. And the strangest thing was that it always came when the moon was high, as if the sky itself were conspiring to open the way for voices that should no longer exist. I walked alone down the main street, my boots squeaking against the hollow floorboards, and I swore I felt invisible eyes peering behind the closed windows. No lamps remained lit after midnight. The residents learned early that darkness was a protective veil, because what moved beyond it refused to be looked at. They say every sheriff needs to carry a little courage in their pocket, along with their ammunition. I carried courage, yes, but I also carried sins. And maybe that's what made me listen more than others. Maybe that's what kept me glued to every strange sound, as if death itself were whispering just to me. It was on one of those nights that I realized the river wasn't just moaning, it was crying. And that cry wasn't asking for help. It wasn't seeking comfort. It was a call that wouldn't leave me alone until I answered. It wasn't always the wind. Sometimes it was the cry of someone who shouldn't be alive anymore. And that's where my story begins. Ever since that night, I realized the river wasn't just moaning. It was crying. Something inside me stirred like an animal trapped in a cage. I knew I couldn't ignore it. In Red Hollow, everyone learned early on that the river had its own rules and that breaking them was an invitation to never return. The older residents spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid the water itself might hear. They avoided crossing the bridge after sunset, even if it meant an hours-long walk home. It was as if the darkness had turned the riverbed into a distorted mirror, reflecting not only the sky, but also the secrets no one dared tell. I watched this. Fear spread through people like a plague. Mothers would pull their children indoors before the moon rose above the horizons, and saloon men would close their doors early, preferring to lose money rather than challenge what lived near the shore. And always, someone would mention the same detail, the feminine lament. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a forgotten village superstition. But the more reports came in, the harder it was to ignore. They all described the same scene, a woman's voice, crying softly, always close to midnight. The sound came from the center of the water, as if trapped between the currents, never approaching the shore, but never moving away either. And there was a consensus among the residents. No matter how much I called, no one dared answer. Fear was greater than curiosity. Everyone except me. That night, as the hands of the old tower struck 12 times, I decided to face what was calling me. Not out of bravery, make no mistake. There was no glory in what I felt. It was necessity, like an itch in the soul that won't go away until it's scratched with blood. I kept the iron star tightly strapped to my chest, as if it still held some power against what I was about to encounter. And with slow steps, I headed toward the bridge. The river cried again, and this time I would answer. The wood of the bridge creaked beneath my footsteps, as if protesting my decision. The sound was harsh, broken, each crack echoing through the valley like a warning I pretended not to understand. The moon was high, reflecting in the mirror of the river like a silver scar cutting through the darkness. It was then that I saw her at the water's edge, standing with the serenity of someone from another world, stood a woman in a white dress. The garment seemed sewn by the night itself, no seams, no details, just a pale fabric that swayed gently in the absence of wind. Her long, pitch-black hair covered her face, falling in heavy strands until it almost touched the river's surface. For a moment, I thought it was a lost resident, someone approaching in search of silence. But something was wrong. The reflection in the water was too perfect. Every movement, every curve of her body repeated itself, as if the river were a solid mirror, not a liquid one. No ripples, no tremors, just an exact copy, as if there were no distinction between the figure and its shadow. The sound of crying reached me, and my hands balled into fists without me realizing it. It wasn't a simple wail, it was a raw, deep ache that pierced through flesh and lodged in bone. There was an ancient weight to the sound, as if each tear were made from centuries of regret. I stood there, unable to move, my throat dry as desert dust. With every second, the crying seemed closer, though the figure remained motionless on the opposite bank. I couldn't tell if it was an illusion or a spell, but the air grew thick, hard to breathe, as if the river itself was sucking the oxygen from the night. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if the veil of black hair was calling to me, hiding secrets I shouldn't want to see. My heart was beating slow, heavy, and I realized I wasn't just hearing a cry. I was hearing a call. And in that moment, I understood. She knew I was there. My instincts told me to turn back, but something stronger than fear kept me there. It was as if the very earth beneath my boots was pushing me forward, as if each step were chosen by a force beyond my own. I watched her from afar, motionless, hunched over the river, and the lament seemed to grow, spreading through the air like an invisible mist. I tried to call her. My voice was hoarse, almost breaking in the cold early morning air. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing, no reaction. The crying continued, insistent, as if my presence meant nothing. Still, I knew. She knew I was there. The wind blew suddenly, kicking up dust from the road and tearing dry leaves from the twisted trees. The sound I heard wasn't just the wind. Crying mingled with it, transforming into something more. It wasn't a lament, it was a call, a deep whisper, full of promise and threat at once, vibrating within my chest as if it came not from outside, but from within my own flesh. My eyes scanned the riverbank, Horses that once grazed freely along the riverbank were distant, huddled together silently, as if an invisible barrier prevented them from approaching. Not even the red, hollow dogs, known for following any scent or trail, dared approach. There was a clearing around the woman, a circle of respect or fear that even the animals understood. I took another step, and the wood of the bridge groaned loudly, betraying my presence. For the first time, the crying stopped. The silence that filled the night was so absolute that I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was as if the world had held its breath, waiting for the next movement. "Who are you?" I ventured again, my hand instinctively resting on the handle. "Bolver." But how could bullets help against something that might not even be flesh? The white dress billowed, even though the wind had died down. It was a slow, almost gentle movement, but it made me take a half step back without realizing it. There was something forbidden about that approach. I could feel it, like stepping too close to the edge of an abyss, and your body knowing, even before your mind, that one false step means eternal fall. Her breathing was ragged. Now it no longer sounded like a cry of pain, but of anticipation, as if she were waiting for something, as if I were the answer to a void too ancient to measure. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized my every step was echoed by the sound of water. Not waves, not current footsteps, as if someone within the river were walking alongside me, mimicking my every movement, mirroring my every choice. I moved a little closer until I could see the line of her fragile shoulders in the moonlight. My heart beat slowly, heavily, as if each beat were a blow to my ribs. I had no courage left, only the certainty that retreat was no longer possible. It was then that I understood the reason for the residents' fear. The animals' silence, the reverence that even the wind seemed to hold before that figure. It wasn't an ordinary cry. It wasn't even human. It was an invitation, a spell, an invisible rope that pulled anyone who dared listen into the river. And I, Elias Blackthorn, was already within that calling. The river suddenly fell silent. Neither the rustling of the trees nor the breath of the wind dared interrupt that moment. The woman remained motionless, her shoulders hunched, her head slightly bowed forward, as if weeping before an invisible grave. I held my breath, waiting for her to do something, anything. Then it happened. The crying didn't stop, changed. The sound transformed into something that didn't belong in this world. A muffled, dry laugh that echoed like the cracking of bone, peer in a grave. It was a broken, joyless laugh that seemed to mock me, mock my own pain. That sound was so wrong, as if despair had found pleasure in itself. My muscles tensed, and as she began to slowly turn her body toward me, I realized the worst was yet to come. The moon illuminated her white dress, soaked to the hem, as if she had just emerged from the bottom of the river. Dark droplets dripped from her long strands of hair, falling into the water without forming circles. This was no ordinary liquid. It disappeared as soon as it touched the surface. When her face finally revealed itself, the world around me seemed to collapse. She had no eyes. Where they should have been, there were only black holes, deep cavities, that seemed to extend beyond her flesh, as if they were open doors to an endless abyss. They weren't wounds, they weren't scars, they were voids. Voids that watched me, that passed through me, that possessed me. My mouth went dry. Air struggled to enter my lungs. What I saw wasn't just a woman, it was the living memory of death, molded into human form. And then she spoke. The voice didn't just come from his throat. It came from the river, the bridge, the wind, which with a drowned sound, as if each word had to wade through gallons of water before reaching me. Did you see my children? The question cut me deeper than any knife. It wasn't just a request. It was a demand, a judgment. The whole world seemed to echo the same phrase, repeating it like a sentence that couldn't be avoided. My feet wanted to run, but they were stuck. My heart wanted to scream, but it was silent. With every moment, I felt like it didn't see me as a stranger to that thing. I was someone who owed an answer, someone who carried the blame. And it was in that moment, hearing laughter mixed with tears again, that I understood. There was no mourning there. There was hunger, an ancient hunger, one that didn't ask for comfort. It asked for surrender. A dry crack sounded beneath my feet. I looked down and realized I was no longer on solid wood. The bank had become quicksand, slowly sucking my boots in. The river wasn't just water, it was a living trap. The white figure began to grow before me, as if the night itself were inflating. It, with each tear that fell from its empty face, the water rose into human forms, liquid arms that reached out to grab me. My body struggled, but the more I moved, the deeper I sank. The air was heavy, and each breath felt like swallowing mud. Her muffled laughter echoed from all around, mingling with the sound of the river, which now seemed to beat against me like a giant heart. A thought cut through my mind with painful clarity. I wasn't just facing a ghost. I was being judged, condemned, and dragged into the river with a last effort. I managed to free myself from the sand that was pulling me, falling to my knees on the bank. The cold of the river still wrapped around me like invisible chains. But I was alive. When I looked up, she was gone. The silence had returned, heavy, suffocating, as if nothing had happened. But when I reached my office, the floor felt damp beneath my boots. In the hallway, wet footprints stretched all the way to the door, as if someone had entered before me. The same trail I'd seen in the river's reflection was now inside my life. I didn't sleep that night, or the following ones, because I understood the truth. She didn't stay in the river. Since then, every bridge I cross, every current I listen to, carries the same lament. And I leave a warning to you who hear me now. If the river cries and calls your name, do not answer, because she is still searching, and it may be you she confuses with her children. Don't think it's over. The desert holds more secrets than men can bear. On the screen, the next story is already calling your name. But be careful. Each click is a step deeper into the darkness, and when you realize it, you might not be able to go back.